Hi, this is Cameron Murray, and I'm going to be evaluating accessibility in web format. So this is a website, rlasddeutsch.weebly.com. This is a website that I've created as well as in a Word document format, which has also been converted to a PDF. Right off the bat, some of the things that are accessible with the website. The font, as you can see, is easy to read. It's set on a red background here. It's white font, so there's high contrast, which should be easy to read. And up here as well, we have white font on a black background. Going down through, let's hit up verbs. There's also high contrast text here, white background, black text. One of the things that I thought wasn't quite as accessible is the title and subtitle of some of the web pages. Because there's an image in the background, the white font might not stand out quite as much, and it could be hard to read. Dealing with the hyperlinks and things like that, I have tables here. The hyperlinks are easy to find. Here's a statement: click the buttons below to navigate to the desired tenses and moods or other parts of verbs for explanations and exercises. So it's clearly defined as to what the buttons will do. Perhaps could be a little better. It could be stated a little bit better in terms of how to get to those places, maybe by saying click on this to get to this. So I could click on tenses to learn more about tenses, or click on present tense to be navigated to a page that discusses the generalities of present tense, things like that. One other problem that I saw on this page, so I can zoom in, which is accessible. So the text increases in size, making it easier to read. One problem was the images here. So we can see this button, or, well, it's actually not a button, but it's an image that says tense, and it's a small image which does not resize. So it becomes blurry as I increase the font size there, which could be a problem. So something that's not quite as accessible. So like I said, the tables here that I formatted are easy to read. It kind of shows how everything's broken down. That's what these images represent: tense on this row, mood on this row, etc. And then all of these represent a tense. It could perhaps be a little bit better in terms of showing how the indicative and subjunctive are related to present tense, maybe just by using some borders or something like that, so it's very clearly defined, therefore making it easier to read, not only for people with impairments, but for any student, really. Another part of my website that I thought was accessible, or met the requirements for being accessible, is that there is no blinking content. I didn't have anything that would be blinking, or be blinking longer than 3 seconds. Another thing that I thought was accessible is that the navigation is pretty clear and easy to follow. Each submenu is very easy to see. I think there's a lot of contrast with the font on the black background there, and it shouldn't be too hard to follow it down through. I do think there is an exception for that. If you can't use a mouse, it might be harder to follow that and use the tab key. I have actually been working on narrowing down the amount of submenus and making it just so there are a few pages, and then you can follow those submenus from the main page. For example, on this verb page, it used to be several step downs for each tense, but I changed that to one page, and then you can select it from a table. So that's just one other thing to add to my list. And then I think the last thing that I thought was pretty accessible was the exercises. So I had opportunities for students to actively participate or explore or experiment. So for example, I'm just going to click on verbs. So this was an activity that is for sein und haben. So it's a present tense indicative verbs activity. It is a Google form embedded on the site. I did try to use the tab key and it was not working. It only brings up my URL up, and then that's it. So I couldn't tab to select through these. Even if I click on one, it wasn't working. So that might be another problem, but it is, as I said, an opportunity for students to practice and kind of explore the language a little bit more. So I thought that was also relevant. I also have other activities throughout, depending on which page you go onto. So that also speaks to that aspect. Some other things to add to the list of things that maybe weren't so accessible. Under the culture section here, I do have some pictures and videos. They aren't really captioned, neither the picture nor video here. I do have titles to them, which I think are very clearly defined, but they're not captioned. And then, as I mentioned before, some of the images weren't resizing. I believe this one does, at least a little bit. So that was a problem. Also dealing with images, although this one is not an image, as I mentioned before, the header images were not weren't making the reading of the text, the title text and subtitle text easy. So it could be difficult there for some students. I also mentioned that the navigation might be difficult on some browser windows, as there are a lot of submenus, and also about the Google Forms. So some things that I might want to correct in the future and will be working on. I do want to add a glossary. I think that would be helpful, because I do have a lot of grammatical terms on here. The captions for the images and videos I think are something I want to work on, and then kind of trying to maybe find a different way of embedding a form or finding a different form so that it's easier to navigate if a student can't use a mouse or something to that extent. The next item I'm evaluating for accessibility is a worksheet that I made. I did make it in Word, but I saved it as a PDF because I do not have Word on my home computer and it wouldn't have formatted everything the same way. So this is a PDF that came from a Word document and it was exported through Word. Some things that I thought were accessible: the contrast of the text. Obviously the black text on white background should be high contrast. There is a good chunking of information, so as you can see here, it's kind of broken down. I have a general two-way prepositions section, and then it's kind of a step here once we figure out what preposition in case to use, and it goes on. And then that is also broken down into definite articles, indefinite articles, and then there are 4 steps that I announce, and then an activity for practice. So that was the chunking of information that I thought was pretty accessible. There is some personalization and contextualization in here as well, particularly in the activity part where the students have to fill out the prepositional phrases. And then the rules or list here, the process that I have, that's kind of a prompt for promoting self-regulation or independence. So that when they go through the activity, they can kind of work on it on their own and use the steps that were provided to help them to get the right answers or to make progress on learning the concept. Things that weren't so accessible. Although the tables are labeled pretty clearly, I feel like maybe some of the positioning, like this one, isn't quite as good as it could be. Possibly also the dotted lines around the table or the border and even in between there. I don't know if that would be a problem per se, but it could be. And then the reading order as well, dealing with the tables and just how it's formatted within the text, I think that could also be a problem, because you can see the text kind of goes around the table. So the readability might not be quite as good as it could be. Some of the things that I want to correct with this document are, of course, the tables, some of the problems they're posing, and then kind of formatting the text and organizing it in a more readable way would also be helpful. But overall, I think it was fairly accessible and met most of the criteria for Word documents and PDFs from the Online Accessibility Handbook.